Did no one tell the Russians that advancing in columns in 2025 is a bad idea? A Ukrainian Leopard 2A4 just turned their heavy armor into a scrapyard special. But hold your applause, because things haven't always been this one-sided. Back in 2016, the tables were completely turned when 8 Turkish Leopard got smoked by militants using anti-tank guided missiles. So how did the legendary German kitty end up like this? We will try to find the answers by looking at how one of Europe's most expensive tanks, the Leopard 2, and its younger brother, Leo I, fought in Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. And by the end, we'll find out, does a $30 million tank have a future on the battlefield, or just a VIP seat in a museum? During World War II, the Wehrmacht had a serious talent for building killer tanks. The Tiger and Panther were absolute beasts on the battlefield, but after Germany lost the war, its legendary tank-building tradition went into retirement. By the 1950s, West Germany was rolling around in hand-me-down American M47 and M48 Pattons. Not exactly the fierce German war machines they were used to. It wasn't until the 1960s that the world got to see Germany's comeback kid, the Leopard 1. If you appreciate German engineering, smash that like button. Faster than a Leopard takes down a T-72. The Leopard 1 didn't just become the pride of the Bundeswehr, it aimed to be the best tank in all of Europe. But did it actually live up to the hype? Well, on the testing range, sure. But in real battles, that's where things get complicated. The first combat deployment of Leopard 1 didn't happen until the 1990s during the Bosnian War. 3 Serbian T-55s, backed by infantry, were shelling a UN observation post in the mountains where Swedish and Norwegian troops were stationed. Every air support request was denied. That left only one option: send in the Danish Leopard 1 A5S. "We intended to move in with tanks because they tend to stop the shooting," reasoned Danish Colonel Lars Miller, who led the tank unit. The support column arrived at midnight, but the attackers weren't intimidated and kept pushing forward. Mortar shells and anti-tank missiles exploded dangerously close to the Leopards. One of those missiles should have been a direct hit, if not for a lucky moment when the tank driver stopped just in time, causing the rocket to detonate right in front of them. The response? Swift and brutal. Commander Carsten Rasmussen ordered the gunners to return fire. Now imagine the look on the enemy infantry's faces when the rain of tank shells started pouring down. Within 2 hours, the Leopards had taken out all 3 T-55s, which lacked effective night optics. One well-placed shot even triggered a massive ammunition explosion. Do you think the enemy appreciated the fireworks? Doubt it, but we do know one thing: they were brave because the fight wasn't over yet. Commander Rasmussen assessed the situation. He knew they had the upper hand, but instead of pressing forward, he ordered his tanks to pull back to a safe distance. A strange decision when you're on the verge of total victory, right? Well, not really. If even one anti-tank missile had connected, the Danes would have lost a tank and its 4-man crew. And when the battlefield is blowing up around you, it's hard to count how many ATGMs the enemy still has left. Subscribe if you want to hear more about Western tanks in real combat. A heavier, better armored tank could have stayed and finished the job. The Leopard 2A4, for example, has 6 times the armor protection and can fight in conditions that would spell instant doom for a Leopard 1A5. This battle in the former Yugoslavia proved the superiority of German optics and firepower, but it also exposed a critical weakness: that paper-thin 70mm armor. And in future wars, this flaw would nearly get tank crews killed. Fast forward to 2006, and now it's Canada's turn. They sent their Leopard 1C2s, upgraded with Megza's armor, to support coalition forces in Afghanistan's mountains. They were backed by 4 ARVs and 4 AEVs on Leopard 1 chassis. You'd think they'd have an easy time given their opponents were just Taliban fighters with basic anti-tank weapons and IEDs. Well, think again. The Afghan campaign turned into a harsh lesson. Canadian Leopards suffered at least 3 total losses and 15 damaged tanks. Crews scrambled to add extra mine protection, but that was just a temporary fix. Another nasty surprise? The heat. When you're covered in dust and the sun is trying to roast you alive, the last thing you want is to marinate inside a metal box with 0 air conditioning. But that's exactly what happened. And that was just the beginning. Canada's Leopard 1C2 fiasco was so disastrous that even Jordan, desperate for tanks to fight ISIS, turned them down. The situation got so bad that Canada scrapped its entire Leopard 1C2 fleet in 2017. Today, the only place you'll see them is as museum pieces or parked as monuments near military bases. Despite their rocky combat history, some Leopard 1 variants are still in service and performing just fine. So why do some countries turn them into battlefield beasts, while others lose them to weaker enemies? The answer is simple: adapt or die. Success comes to those who study the realities of war and learn from past mistakes. It's not just about good tactics and maximizing strengths. It's about patching up weaknesses before they get you killed. In Ukraine, every Leo 1 is worth its weight in gold. The Russians have a numbers advantage in nearly every weapon category, so Ukrainians took the deployment and maintenance of Western tanks very seriously. Learning from past conflicts, they beefed up the armor. Because when you've got everything from ATGMs to FPVs flying at you, 70 millimeters of steel and a quick prayer won't cut it. That's why Ukrainian engineers gave the Leopard 1 a full armor upgrade, adding dynamic protection across the frontal arc, including the lower front plate, 3/4 of the hull, and the actual turret. The result? A tank straight out of Transformers. Seriously, wouldn't you watch a movie about this beast? They also reinforced the turret to hull joint, a known weak spot, and added hoods, drone protection cages that look like something straight out of Pimp My Ride. We wouldn't be surprised if there's a high-end sound system inside, just like in Exhibit's rides. But let's get serious. So far, Ukraine's armor upgrades have worked. They've saved both tanks and crews, and let's be real, trained soldiers are way more valuable than metal. Need proof? One Leo 1 took 10 FPV drone hits. Yes, 10. And the crew made it out alive. That alone proves you can never have too much armor. After 3 years of fighting against a larger, better-equipped enemy, Ukrainians have figured out the real strengths of the Leo 1. First up, its fire control system and night optics, allowing it to engage targets up to 4 kilometers away, a distance at which most Russian tanks can't even see it. The second ace up Leopard 1's sleeve, its 105mm armor-piercing shells, more than enough to take down a T-72, T-80, or even a T-90 head-on. And the third key advantage? This cat's got speed, a fast reverse gear and quick acceleration, allowing it to jump into or out of battle in seconds. Not bad for a tank older than most of its crew members. Leopard 1 is a battle-hardened veteran, but no tank lasts forever, especially when technology doesn't wait for anyone. The Germans knew this back in the 80s. That's why after experimenting with the MBT-70, they rolled out something new, the Leopard 2. It aced its test trials and was ready for war. The first real battlefield test for the Leopard 2 came in Afghanistan, where Canada deployed 22 A6 models. During a mission, one of them hit a powerful IED planted by insurgents. Did the upgraded armor hold up? Hell yeah. My crew stumbled upon an IED and made history as the first to test the Leopard 2 A6M packet, a Canadian officer wrote to the German Ministry of Defense. His verdict? If they'd been in any other vehicle, nobody would have survived. The driver suffered a fractured femur, while the rest of the crew walked away with bruises. Let's be real. A hospital stay beats an early trip to the afterlife. As for the tank, it got patched up and was back in action soon after. A similar story played out with Danish Leopard 2A5s. One was providing fire support to British troops when it hit an IED. The tracks were damaged, but the crew was unharmed, and the tank drove itself back to base for repairs. Another Danish crew, however, wasn't so lucky. Their tank hit a massive explosive, and the driver didn't survive. This experience proved that the Leopard 2 is far tougher than its older sibling, but it still needs constant armor upgrades with every new version. But let's be real. Tech alone doesn't win wars. Tactics matter. And when those tactics fail, even the best equipment turns into scrap metal. Case in point, in 2016, Turkey deployed regular army units equipped with Leopard 2A4TR tanks to support Free Syrian Army FSA proxy forces fighting ISIS. While the FSA troops crawled forward, the Leopard 2s took the brunt of the attack. They operated in platoons of 3 to 4 tanks, sometimes even solo. Their fire support was coordinated based on intel from the FSA, and that turned out to be a fatal mistake. With poor ground reconnaissance and weak communication, the Leopard crews parked their tanks in exposed positions, completely unaware that experienced ISIS fighters were watching their every move. The militants, familiar with the terrain, launched surprise attacks with anti-tank guided missiles, ATGMs, hitting them from open flanks. A few well-placed shots, and the first irrecoverable losses started piling up. Others drove over Soviet-era mines and makeshift IEDs built from artillery shells. A real DIY project, huh? Wouldn't be surprised if these guys blew off a few fingers while making them. The result? Immobilized tanks, abandoned crews, and to make sure the Leopard stayed dead, ISIS fighters planted explosives inside the disabled tanks and blew them up all over again. Poorly built defensive positions played another cruel joke. The makeshift dirt cover was too low, leaving the tanks fully exposed from the front and sides. If engineering units had taken their job more seriously, they could have saved both the tanks and their crews. Another issue? Zero maneuvering. In urban battles, Leopard 2s failed to use their speed advantage. Instead of firing and repositioning, they stayed put after a few shots, making themselves easy targets for ISIS fighters armed with old but still deadly ATGMs. The Turkish operation proved a brutal lesson. Even top-tier expensive tanks can be utterly wiped out if paired with bad tactics and untrained crews. Poorly armed but well-coordinated fighters destroyed 8 Leopards, a disaster that could have been avoided with better reconnaissance, strategy, and training. But history has no what-ifs. Fast forward to 2022 and Leopard 2 was back in action, this time in Ukraine. But instead of ISIS with outdated weapons, its opponents were the full force of the Russian army, armed with a mix of Soviet-era and modern Russian weaponry. Ukrainian tank crews used Leopard 2A6 primarily for infantry support, in offensives and maneuver defense. Here, speed became a game-changer. Despite its 60-ton weight, the Leo 2's turbo-diesel engine easily outperforms Soviet and Russian counterparts. It accelerates faster than a T-80. Basically, turn the key and you're off. The automatic gearbox responds instantly, and the best part? It can reverse at 31 kilometers per hour. In battle, when you need to get out fast, this is a huge advantage. T-64s and T-72s crawl backward at barely 5 kilometers per hour, says a Ukrainian soldier. Leopard 2's optics also earned high praise, allowing clear targeting at 4 to 5 kilometers, even against infantry. And when you combine smooth mobility, rock-solid stabilization, and night optics, Russians start getting nervous. Night and early morning battles, that's when the Leo 2 really shines. In 3 years of full-scale war, not a single Leopard 2 has suffered a turret explosion, nor has its armor failed to protect a crew from FPV drones or ATGMs. Can't say the same for Russian tanks, even the advanced T-90s. The Ukrainian army is probably the only force in the world using both Leopard 1 and Leopard 2 at scale in modern warfare. Their experience has given manufacturers invaluable insight, not just into the tank's strengths, but also into their biggest design flaws. Due to intense battlefield use, some Leopard 2 A6s are now out of action. And not just because of combat damage, there simply aren't enough spare parts. This isn't just a Ukrainian problem either. Other Leopard 2 operators are struggling too. Other countries also have issues with Leopard 2 because Germany has serious problems with spare parts. We don't understand the situation, but it is what it is. This shortage is a direct result of Germany's stagnant defense industry. And that's a big problem because China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia won't wait for the West to ramp up production. For context, Germany used to produce 300 tanks a year. Now, barely 60. Hear that? That's a wake-up call. Hopefully Germany and NATO will take this seriously, or the consequences won't be pretty. But there's good news too. Germany is paying close attention to the lessons of the Ukraine war and adapting to modern threats. Defense giant KMW has unveiled the upgraded Leopard 2 A7, featuring trophy active protection, a new L55A1 gun, enhanced mine resistance, a laser warning system against ATGMs, and a 360-degree vision system. Turns out when Russian propagandists keep threatening to nuke Berlin, it's a great motivator to invest in defense. The best strategy? Overmatch the enemy in both quality and quantity. Germany nailed the first part, but the second? That's where it gets tricky. Some Leopard 2 variants cost over $30 million without maintenance. How many NATO countries can afford that? Rhetorical question. Even older models are absurdly expensive. Example, Spain is spending 204 million euros just to maintain its Leopard fleet. Could the Baltic states afford that? Highly doubtful. Despite these challenges, the Leopard remains a formidable tank. Cutting-edge upgrades plus real combat experience suggest that even better versions are coming. And when the next war rolls around, they just might steal the show. Germany is already working on Leo 3 and, together with France, developing the next-gen MGCS. Just take a look at these beasts. They're set to have better electronics, tougher armor, and heavier guns. But let's not forget the other side of the coin. Sky-high costs and the challenge of mass production are still big concerns. So what do you think the ultimate trump card of a future tank should be? Unbreakable armor, remote operation, or a laser cannon? Drop your thoughts in the comments.